the spiritual truth today?
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
Your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
And over your heart, and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual wisdom that I'm working with today is that giving up is not a spiritual practice. Giving up is not a spiritual practice. In fact, it's a signal to the universe that we don't trust. It's a signal to the universe that we don't really believe that we live in an unlimited universe. We don't really believe that we have a land of pure potentiality in which we can all come from. A land so plentiful that there is plenty of solutions to every one of our challenges. That there is plenty of ideas. There's plenty of forgiveness to be received and to be given. There is plenty of healing in our life. Oftentimes people in recovery say, don't give up before the miracle. And what they're saying is, don't give up until you can feel the sobriety that is your divine birthright. But we could be talking about anything. Don't give up before that you come connected deeply with other people in your life. Don't give up before you get that project, that idea that will move your project to the next expression in your life. You and I, we call those miracles when that happens. When we're in a mess and something happens from the universe that gets us out of that mess, we call that a miracle. But truthfully, it's all in a day's work for God. And those of us who believe that God is with us all the time. It's not out of the order, it is the order. When we believe all things are possible with God in our life. When we believe that divine intelligence is at work. See, don't give up is not a spiritual practice. But this does not mean that you might need to not need to tweak some things in your life on your spiritual journey. You may need to change directions on a project. You may need to transition a marriage or a friendship in your life. You may need to transition a career in your life. But these are activities that keep us going. They're not activities that are designed for us to give up in our life. See, we don't want anybody to give up on love. We don't want anybody to give up on how fabulous it is to have a best friend that you can call all the time. We don't want anybody to give up on having a group of friends that you can call when you need to in your life. We don't want anybody to give up on having soul-fulfilling work in your life. We want you to have all of those things. Maybe some tweaking needed to get them, but never give up on your desires in your life. See, people who give up often feel like failures. And people who have a prolonged feeling of failure will often feel bitter. And here's what happens. Bitter people want company. And so they will try and get you to come with them. And we've all met bitter people. Sometimes our boss, we've had a bitter boss, or we've had a bitter teacher, or maybe a bitter clergy person. We know what that feels like to have somebody bitter in maybe our parents were even bitter. All of them have worked hard to get us on that train with them because they wanted company. But if we know that all things are possible with God, we can take a later train. We can let them go. We don't have to do anything to them. We pray for their expression and just bye-bye and take a later train on our life and in our life, and then do the work ourselves to get where we need to get in our life. Well, we're doing a series. We're almost at the end. Next week will be the end of it. We've been doing a series on a little book called The 10 Things to Do When Your Life Falls Apart. And it's designed to help us with today's spiritual wisdom. That giving up is not a spiritual practice in our life. It's written by a woman named Daphne Rose Kingma. And we've talked about several of those things. We talked about when your life falls apart, You have to learn how to cry hard. When your life falls apart, you have to face your default settings. If your default setting is a martini, if your default setting is the refrigerator, wherever your default setting is, we have to face it. Doesn't mean that we have to give them up if you don't want to, but at least we have to know that's what I'm doing here. I'm not moving along on my spiritual journey. I'm going into my default setting. The third one we talked about was learn how to do different things, something different. The next one was if our life is falling apart, we have to learn how to let go. If there's somebody in your life who wants to walk out the door, get them cab fare, as I say. Let them go. Bye-bye now. Don't come back. Because if they want to be gone, they're not doing anything for you. They're not doing anything for you. And eventually, you'll get to a person who will make you feel better. The last one we talked about was remember who you've always been. And we talked about that in terms of both the spiritual way, who you've always been as a representation of God on the planet, period. A representation of God on this planet. That's who you've always been, that's always who you are right now, and it's who you always will be, no matter what you've done in this life. Well, today we're talking about the next one, the sixth one, which is when your life is falling apart, learn how to persist. Learn how to be a persistent person. Kingma says this: persistence is the spiritual grace that allows us to continue to act with optimism even when we feel trapped in the pit of hell. Now we know in this church that hell is limited and lack thinking. Limitation and lack thinking. That's where our hell is. Persistence is the spiritual grace. Spiritual grace is always within you. You don't have to go get spiritual grace. It's there. It's always there. You didn't damage it. It's always been there. It always will be there. But we have to look for it. We have to recognize it in our life. And when we recognize it, it allows us to continue to act with optimism even when we feel like we're in the pit of hell. See, we can't have persistence until we allow that natural grace that is within us to be our conscious thought. Our conscious thought. We can't suspect it's there. We have to know it's there. We have to believe it's there. See, when we can do that, we can walk in grace. But before we walk in grace in the pit of hell, we need to practice it before we get there. Before our life starts to fall apart. Before you can feel the fires of hell lapping at your feet, before you feel like you're at the end of your rope, before you feel like nobody likes you, before you feel like you can never get out of debt, that's when we begin to practice feeling this spiritual grace that will enable us to walk in optimism. Before you feel like, I'll never meet a person, I'll never have a mate. That's when we learn how to, because when we do that, then when we can meet those issues and become successful around them in our life. Well, that's all well and good, Reverend Georgia, but how do I do that? Practice, practice, practice. You practice acknowledging that spiritual grace, that spiritual grace is within you, that it's natural to you in your life. If everybody in this church, this would tomorrow, starting tomorrow morning, spend 2 minutes anchoring ourselves in the idea that we live in a universe that is designed for our success. Now everybody, don't you have 2 minutes for God in the morning? If what that will do is improve your life, if you make you more successful, make you happier, make you more connected, if we would spend 2 minutes just focusing on this idea that we live in a universe that is designed for our success in our life, our lives would completely change. Even if you think it's a crock, go ahead and do it. Just go ahead tomorrow morning and say, I live in a unlimited universe that is designed for my success. In fact, repeat that after me. I live in a universe that is designed for my success. What if that were true? I live in a universe that is designed for my success. I don't care what a mess I'm in right now. I know that I live in a universe that is designed for my success. And furthermore, I know that I have a natural compassion within me. I know that I have a natural grace that is within me in my life. See, then when we run into that unreasonable boss, when we run into ourselves, when we're spending money we know we don't have, and we told ourselves we wouldn't spend that money, when we run into our teenager who's bound and determined to live life hard, when we run into those situations, we're much easier able to deal with them. And when our life is a mess, no matter what the mess is, when our life is a mess, if we can train ourselves to ask this question, how is this mess bringing me closer to my success? How is this mess bringing me closer to my success? Because every mess we get ourselves into is purposeful for our soul's journey. Might not make us happy, might make us very unhappy, but it is purposeful to our soul's growth and our ultimate success in our life. Now here's the thing. When you walk with spiritual grace and you ask this question, you can't ask it with your cynical mind. You have to ask it with that kind of authentic curiosity that we have. How is this mess going to help me become more successful? But you can't ask it with your cynical mind. You know that cynical mind. Oh, what's this doing for me? But we have to ask it with an authentic curiosity in our life. And I promise you, if you will do that, you will always find an answer. And if for some reason you don't find that answer, but let me tell you something. When you ask a question like that of the universe, how is this mess going to further my success? You got to be quiet for a minute. You got to wait for the answer. It's not that God is taking a long time to answer you, but you're so unused to having messages from the universe, it takes a minute. So be still for a minute and see what it is. And if you absolutely cannot get an answer, you call a practitioner. And you say, here is my mess. And Reverend Georgia says that there's some kernel of information in here that is designed for my further growth and success. What would that be? And begin to work it out with them. They will help you uncover exactly what that is in your life. Calvin Coolidge says this. Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful people with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full of educated derelicts. Persistence and discrimination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, "Press on," has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race in our life. In Galatians 6:9, it says this, don't give up before the harvest. Paul's telling us to be persistent. In the Quran, in chapter 8, it says, God is with those who persevere. Persistence is a powerful, powerful characteristic to cultivate in our life. And it's so much easier when we understand at our deepest level that we live in an unlimited universe with plenty of everything in our life. Somewhere in the distance, your future is holding out its arms to meet you. ready to bring you whatever you have the courage to ask for. It is already holding in trust whatever you have the courage to keep steadfastly moving toward. It wants to join hands with you to create the next chapter of your life, but it won't. It can't. If you stay riveted in the same spot, whining and complaining, passive and fearful and resentful. That's because the future always comes toward us in exactly the spirit in which we approach it. Hands and hearts open, or souls withered in defeat. Persistence is one of the 10 things you can do when your life begins to fall apart. Let's look at the 7th thing. The 7th thing that you can do when your life begins to fall apart is to begin to integrate your crisis. You integrate your loss with you. You have to accept what happened, that it happened, and integrate it into the fabric of your life. Integration is synonymous with wholeness. Integration is synonymous with wholeness, the weaving together of opposites in our life. Emotional wholeness is the ability to both laugh and cry. Haven't you done that in your life, where you've just been laughing and crying at the same situations? That's because you've integrated both of those things. Sometimes we felt peaceful and terrified at the same moment because we've begun to integrate those two experiences. Some of us have felt a part of the whole part of the humanity and the cosmos, and still been able to work alone in a cubicle every single day. Those are bringing the two opposites of our life into integration. See, but true integration of your loss means that you accept the loss. You accept the loss of a person. You accept the loss of a job. You accept the loss of a limb. You accept the loss of a situation in your life. Integration allows you to transform it. And when we integrate our losses with ourselves, that's when full wholeness is possible. Now, to get there, to get to full integration, you have to do 3 things. You have to own it, you have to face it, and you have to find a place for it in your life. Facing it means that you're going to tell yourself the truth about whatever it is that happened. You're not going to embellish it, and you're not going to minimize it in your life. You're going to take the situation and you're going to tell yourself. You don't need to tell anybody else. You're going to need, in fact, it's better not to, because here's what happens. When we want to tell other people what happened, we tend to embellish it so that we increase the amount of compassion that we can elicit in that situation. In order to be able to integrate it, you have to tell yourself the truth, just what happened. Sometimes we diminish it. He didn't mean to hit me. She didn't mean to leave me. We have to tell ourselves the truth of what actually happened in our life. Facing it means telling ourselves the truth. Yeah, he left me. Yeah, I lost half my fortune. Yeah, I got fired from that job. That's the truth of what happens. Owning it means that we don't get to go back. We don't regret it. We don't wish to shut the door on it. It's here, just how it is. It's here, and it's a part of who I am. I'm not going back. I'm not going to be able to change it. I'm not going to go back and change the way my parents treated me. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm going to own it. It's going to be a part of me. I'm going to integrate it into myself. Find it means a place for it in your life. Realizing that there's an opportunity for transformation in that situation when we begin to find a place for it. It means I'm not going to spend one more minute in denial. I'm going to bring it in. Now, I'm not going to make a shrine to it. I'm not going to carry it around with me. I'm going to bring it in, and I'm going to integrate it so that I begin to heal from it in my life. I've heard so many people say, and I probably said it myself, I don't want to go back to my childhood. I don't want to do that. I don't want to have any conscious contact with the way I grew up in my life. And I understand why they're saying it. They're saying it because that was a painful thing and I don't want to think about it anymore. The problem is you're not dismissing it. You're pushing it down. And whatever we push down, we're still carrying around with it. It's just pushed down deeper, but it's still driving our lives. We have to begin to integrate it into ourselves for the healing that is available to us. See, our wholeness is the sum of all of our parts. The parts we want to include and the parts we want to exclude. They're all essential to our wholeness. And when we get to integrate both the positive and the negative, we become stronger human beings. When we integrate those situations that ripped our heart out, were so painful, when we begin to integrate those, we learn how to become more compassionate, and our soul becomes bigger in our life. We grow our souls. The hardest part of integration, I think, is when we try and integrate failed relationships, those failed marriages, those failed friendships in our lives. Those are hard to integrate because we think they're so-called failed. They were never failed. Every situation, every person that we've ever come in contact with is for our benefit, not for theirs, but for our soul's journey and for our benefit in our life. See, when we push those down too, when we push down the failed marriage, the doomed friendship, we doom the next marriage. We doom the next relationship in our life. Let me read you a story about a woman named Megan. Megan came to see me because after 2 heartbreaking relationships she had ended, she found herself falling in love with another man. She was scared, she told me. She didn't want to get hurt again. She said she'd wasted a lot of good years on those 2 relationships that had ended, and she didn't want to waste any more time. I pointed out to Megan that she had basically disowned both of her previous relationships. She was treating them like bad things that she had to take a stand against, things that should never have happened. She said this was true. She did wish they had never happened, and she definitely didn't want something like that to ever happen again. When we talked about the details of those relationships, though, it was clear that the first had involved a very healing connection. In it, she experienced the steady love and daily stability that she had never experienced as a child of 2 alcoholics. When it ended, she had gone on to have a passionate romance that engaged her sensuality in a delicious and joyful way, although it was clear from the beginning that this man would never be a life partner. When I suggested to Megan that she integrate these relationships as a part of her whole story of relationships, she relaxed. Instead of judging herself and the men for being wrong, she realized that she and they had been on a journey together. Now, with the new man she was falling in love with, that journey would continue. When we push things down, we are doomed to repeat them. When we don't begin to integrate them into who they are in your life. If you don't remember anything else, remember this. Every mess you're in is purposeful. It's purposeful for your soul's growth. And you're in a church full of people who will hold great compassion for you, will hold great love for you, will hold you as you go through this experience. But we will never ask you to deny it. We'll never ask you to act like it didn't happen in your life. You know, I want to close with something. Have you ever read something in a book and you liked it so much that you wrote it down and then you went back to the book to find where it was in the book and you can't find it? So I'm going to read you something I think is in this book, but I don't know that. But I want to close with what I think Kingma says. Kingma says, when the disowned is owned, when the dark is nestled in the light, when the new and the old are holding hands, you will have moved into a place beyond your problem. I love that. Let's take this into prayer. Knowing that there's only one power, it's the power of love, and it moves through us easily and effortlessly if we allow it. If we take our pettiness out of the way, if we take our worries out of the way, we take our jealousy out of the way, we just take it out of the way and set it on a shelf. Let the love flow through us. Then there's nothing we can't do. All things are possible. We live in a land of pure potentiality, in which there is no limit to what we can make manifest with the right set of beliefs. I give thanks for this. I release this into the law, and together we say,